I sold my beach house for $23 million and decided to take my daughter and son-in-law to a luxury hotel to celebrate. When they went out for dinner, a desperate maid knocked on my door. "Come see what I found in your son-in-law's room." I panicked and called the police. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. I never imagined that the happiest day of my life would become the beginning of my worst nightmare. At 61 years old, I thought I had seen everything life could throw at me. I was wrong. The sale of my beach house had just closed for $23 million. $23 million. After 35 years of building my construction business from nothing, watching that number appear on the bank transfer felt surreal. My late wife Sarah would have been so proud. She always believed in my dreams, even when I was just a kid from Detroit with calloused hands and big ambitions. To celebrate, I decided to do something special for my daughter Peyton and her husband Jonathan. They had been so supportive during the long selling process, and I wanted to share this moment with them. I booked the penthouse suite at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel in downtown Chicago for a long weekend. 3 adjoining rooms, room service, spa treatments, the works. Money was no longer an object, and I wanted my family to feel that. Peyton looked radiant when we arrived. At 28, she had her mother's gentle smile and my stubborn determination. She and Jonathan had been married for 2 years, and seeing them together always warmed my heart. Jonathan seemed like the perfect husband. Attentive, well-educated, always opening doors for Peyton and making sure she was comfortable. He worked in finance, spoke eloquently about investments and market trends, everything a father could want for his daughter. "Dad, you really didn't have to do all this," Peyton said as we settled into the luxurious suite. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan. "Nonsense," I replied, pulling her into a hug. "Your old man just made the biggest sale of his career. Let me spoil my little girl for once." Jonathan smiled, that charming smile of his. "Mr. Richardson, this is incredibly generous. Peyton and I are so grateful." That Friday evening, they decided to go out for dinner at some fancy French restaurant downtown. I was tired from the travel and preferred to order room service and enjoy the peaceful view. At my age, quiet evenings had become more appealing than bustling restaurants. "Are you sure you don't want to come, Dad?" Peyton asked, adjusting her pearl earrings in the mirror. "I'm sure, sweetheart. You two go enjoy yourselves. Take your time." They left around 7 o'clock, and I settled into the comfortable armchair with a glass of bourbon and the evening news. The suite was silent except for the distant hum of city traffic below. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, there was urgent knocking at my door. I glanced at the clock, 9:30. Too early for Peyton and Jonathan to be back. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. I opened the door to find Maria, one of the housekeeping staff. She was a small woman, probably in her 40s, with worry lines etched deep around her eyes. Her hands were shaking, and she kept glancing down the hallway as if someone might be watching. "Sir, I'm sorry to bother you," she whispered in accented English, "but I need you to see something. It's about your daughter's husband." My stomach immediately tightened. "What about Jonathan?" Maria wrung her hands, clearly distressed. "Sir, I was cleaning their room earlier today. I found something very bad. Please, you must come see." Every instinct told me to follow her. Maria had been nothing but professional and courteous since we arrived. For her to approach me like this, risking her job, meant something was seriously wrong. We walked quickly down the carpeted hallway to Peyton and Jonathan's room. Maria used her master key to let us in. The room was immaculate, as expected, but Maria led me directly to the bathroom. "Look," she said, pointing to the marble countertop near the sink. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. Then Maria opened the medicine cabinet and pointed to a small brown prescription bottle tucked behind Jonathan's toiletries. She carefully removed it and handed it to me. The label read, "Lorazepam, 2 milligrams. Take as needed for anxiety. Patient, Jonathan Mitchell." "I don't understand," I said, though my heart was already racing. Maria's voice was barely a whisper. "Sir, this morning when I cleaned, I saw him putting pills from this bottle into your daughter's coffee cup. He was in the shower. He crushed them first, then stirred them in." The room seemed to spin around me. I gripped the bathroom counter to steady myself. Are you absolutely certain about what you saw? Tears welled up in Maria's eyes. Yes, sir. I have a daughter too. She is the same age as yours. I could not stay quiet. I stared at the prescription bottle, my mind racing. Lorazepam. I knew that name from when Sarah was battling cancer. It was a powerful sedative, often used to treat severe anxiety. But why would Jonathan be giving it to Peyton without her knowledge? There's more, Maria said quietly. She led me to the bedside table and opened the drawer. Inside was a small digital recorder and several documents. I found these when I was dusting. My hands trembled as I picked up one of the documents. It was a power of attorney form with Peyton's signature at the bottom. But something looked off about the signature. It was shaky, uncertain, not like Peyton's usual confident handwriting. The second document made my blood run cold. It was a bank account application for a joint account with Jonathan's name as the primary holder. Again, Peyton's signature looked wrong, almost like someone had signed it while impaired. I turned on the digital recorder. Jonathan's voice filled the small space. But she's completely compliant now. The dosage is perfect. Not enough to make her suspicious, but enough to keep her agreeable to whatever I suggest. The old man's money will be ours soon enough. My legs nearly gave out. I had to sit down on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. My daughter, my precious daughter, was being drugged by her own husband. "Sir, are you okay?" Maria asked, genuinely concerned. I couldn't speak. The reality of what I had just discovered was too overwhelming. Jonathan wasn't the loving husband I thought he was. He was systematically drugging Peyton, manipulating her into signing legal documents while she was impaired. How long had this been going on? How many documents had she signed without really understanding what they were? And what was his ultimate plan? I thought about the past few months, how Peyton had seemed different, more tired, less sharp than usual. I had attributed it to work stress, but now I realized it was something much more sinister. "Maria," I said, my voice hoarse with emotion, "thank you for telling me this. You may have saved my daughter's life." She nodded solemnly. "What will you do?" I looked at the evidence in my hands, the pills, the documents, the recording. My daughter was in danger, and I was the only one who could save her. But I had to be smart about this. If I confronted Jonathan directly, he might disappear, or worse, increase the dosage and hurt Peyton even more. "I need to think," I told Maria. "Can you keep this between us for now?" "Of course, sir. But please, help your daughter soon." As I walked back to my suite, my mind was already forming a plan. I had built a multi-million-dollar business by being strategic and patient. Now, I would use those same skills to protect the most important person in my life. But first, I needed to understand exactly what Jonathan was doing to my daughter, and why. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Maria's terrified face and heard Jonathan's voice on that recording. My daughter was being poisoned by the man she loved, and I was the only one who knew. When Peyton and Jonathan returned from dinner around 11, I forced myself to act normal. Jonathan's smile seemed different now, predatory, calculated. How had I missed it before? "Dad, you should have come with us," Peyton said, though her words seemed slightly slurred. The food was incredible. I studied her face carefully. Her eyes looked glassy, unfocused. She moved more slowly than usual, like someone fighting off fatigue. "I'm just tired," she continued, leaning heavily against Jonathan. "I think I'll go straight to bed." "Of course, darling," Jonathan said, his arm protectively around her waist. But now I saw it differently. He wasn't being protective. He was supporting her because she could barely stand on her own. "Good night, Dad," Peyton mumbled, giving me a loose hug before Jonathan guided her toward their room. "Sweet dreams, sweetheart," I managed to say, though my heart was breaking. As soon as their door closed, I began my own investigation. I couldn't sleep anyway, so I spent the entire night researching lorazepam online. What I learned made me sick to my stomach. The drug was highly addictive and could cause memory problems, confusion, and impaired judgment when used regularly. In the wrong hands, it was the perfect tool for manipulation. Someone could make decisions they would never make sober sign documents they didn't understand, and have little to no memory of doing so. By morning, I had a plan. I needed more evidence, and I needed to understand the full scope of Jonathan's scheme. Most importantly, I needed to do this without alerting him to what I knew. At breakfast, I watched Jonathan carefully. He was attentive to Peyton, making sure her coffee cup was always full, stirring it for her with loving gestures that now seemed sinister. Peyton barely touched her food, pushing scrambled eggs around her plate with unfocused movements. "How are you feeling, honey?" I asked her. "Just tired," she replied, her voice lacking its usual energy. "I've been having trouble sleeping lately. Jonathan thinks I should see a doctor." Jonathan nodded sympathetically. "I've been worried about her, Mr. Richardson. She's been under a lot of stress at work. I actually found a wonderful doctor who specializes in anxiety and sleep disorders, Dr. Marcus Webb. He has excellent credentials." Red flags went up immediately. Jonathan was controlling even her medical care. "That's thoughtful of you," I said carefully. "Has Peyton seen him yet?" "Just once, about 2 weeks ago," Jonathan replied. "He prescribed some mild sleep aids to help her rest better." I forced myself to smile. "And they're helping?" "Oh, yes," Jonathan said, his hand covering Peyton's on the table. "She's been much more relaxed lately, much more agreeable to trying new things, taking on new opportunities." The way he said agreeable made my skin crawl. This wasn't a loving husband worried about his wife's health. This was a predator discussing his victim. After breakfast, I excused myself to make some business calls. Instead, I contacted my lawyer, Robert Chen, who had handled the beach house sale. "Robert, I need you to do something for me, and I need complete discretion." "Of course, Mark. What's going on?" "I need you to investigate a doctor named Marcus Webb. I want to know everything, his credentials, his practice, any disciplinary actions, everything." "Can you tell me why?" I hesitated, then decided Robert needed to know enough to take this seriously. "I think my daughter's husband might be involved in some kind of medical fraud. I can't say more right now, but this is urgent. I'll get started immediately. Give me until this afternoon." Next, I called my old friend Detective Lieutenant Frank Morrison from the Chicago Police Department. Frank and I went way back. He had investigated some thefts at my construction sites years ago, and we had stayed in touch. "Frank, I need a favor. I think my daughter might be in danger, but I need to be very careful how I handle this." "What kind of danger, Mark?" "I think her husband is drugging her without her knowledge. I have evidence, but I need to understand my options before I make any moves." Frank's voice became serious immediately. "That's a felony, Mark. If you have evidence, we need to move on this." "I will, but I need to protect Peyton first. Can you recommend someone who could test her blood discreetly? Someone who would keep this confidential until we decide how to proceed?" "I know a lab technician who owes me a favor, Dr. Sarah Kim at Northwestern Memorial. She's trustworthy and discreet. But Mark, if this is what you think it is, time might be critical." "I understand. I'm going to move fast." The rest of the morning was torture. I had to act normal while watching Jonathan carefully orchestrate Peyton's decline. He suggested they spend the day at the hotel spa, making sure she had multiple opportunities to consume drinks he could tamper with. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Robert. "Mark, you need to hear this. Dr. Marcus Webb lost his medical license in California 3 years ago for overprescribing controlled substances. He's been practicing in Illinois under a provisional license that should have been reviewed months ago. My worst fears were confirmed. Is he working with anyone? That's where it gets interesting. His practice is jointly owned with a man named Jonathan Mitchell." The pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. Jonathan wasn't just drugging Peyton. He had a corrupt doctor helping him do it legally. "Robert, I need you to pull all the financial records you can find on Jonathan Mitchell. Bank accounts, credit reports, everything." "Already on it. Mark, there's something else. Jonathan has power of attorney documents filed for your daughter in 3 different states, all dated within the last 6 months. I had to sit down. This wasn't just about controlling Peyton. This was about positioning himself to access my money through her. That afternoon, when Peyton mentioned feeling dizzy after their spa treatments, I knew I had to act. "Sweetheart, maybe you should see a real doctor. Let me take you to Northwestern Memorial. We should make sure everything's okay." Jonathan immediately protested. "Mr. Richardson, that's not necessary. Dr. Webb has been monitoring her condition very carefully. She just needs rest. I'd feel better if she saw someone at the hospital, I insisted, my voice firm. For the first time since I'd known him, Jonathan looked genuinely worried. Not about Peyton's health, but about losing control of the situation. Dad, Jonathan's right, Peyton said weakly. Dr. Webb said these episodes are normal while my body adjusts to the new medication. My heart sank as I realized how deep this conspiracy went. What new medication, honey? Peyton looked confused, like she was trying to remember something through a fog. I'm not sure. Something for anxiety? Jonathan handles all my medical stuff now. I get so confused about pills and dosages. Jonathan's smile was tight, forced. She signed forms giving me medical power of attorney. It's easier for me to manage her care since she's been so forgetful lately. I wanted to grab him by the throat, but I forced myself to stay calm. Every word he spoke was more evidence of his manipulation. Well, I think a second opinion wouldn't hurt, I said, just to be safe. That evening, I finally understood the full scope of what Jonathan was doing to my daughter. He wasn't just drugging her. He had systematically isolated her from her own medical decisions, her financial autonomy, and even her ability to think clearly. But he had made one critical mistake. He had underestimated a father's love for his daughter. As I prepared for what would be the most important battle of my life, I made a promise to my late wife Sarah I would save our daughter no matter what it cost me. The next morning brought a devastating revelation that changed everything. I woke early, my mind still racing from everything I had discovered about Jonathan's manipulation of Peyton. But what I learned next made me realize the situation was far more urgent than I had imagined. Dr. Sarah Kim from Northwestern Memorial called me at 6 a.m. Her voice was tense, professional, but I could hear the underlying concern. Mr. Richardson, I need you to come in immediately. I was able to analyze the hair sample you provided yesterday. I had managed to get a few strands of Peyton's hair while she was napping in the hotel spa, telling her I was just smoothing down a wild piece. It felt like such a small deception compared to what Jonathan was doing to her. What did you find? I asked, though I was terrified to hear the answer. Your daughter has dangerously high levels of lorazepam in her system, along with traces of zolpidem and alprazolam. That's 3 different sedatives, Mr. Richardson. The combination could be lethal, especially if the dosage increases. My blood turned to ice. Lethal? These drugs interact with each other in dangerous ways. Her liver is being severely stressed, and her cognitive function is deteriorating rapidly. Based on the concentration levels, I estimate she's been receiving these medications for at least 4 to 6 months. 4 to 6 months. I thought back to when Peyton had started seeming different, more tired, less like herself. It coincided exactly with when she and Jonathan had moved in together after their honeymoon. Doctor, what happens if this continues? Mr. Richardson, your daughter could suffer permanent brain damage, liver failure, or worse. We need to get her medical attention immediately. I hung up the phone with shaking hands. Jonathan wasn't just manipulating Peyton, he was slowly killing her. I immediately called Frank Morrison. Frank, it's Mark. I need your help right now. My daughter's life is in immediate danger. I'm listening. The blood work came back. She's being poisoned with multiple drugs. The doctor says it could be fatal if it continues. Where are you now? Still at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel. Don't do anything until I get there. I'm bringing backup and an ambulance. We need to handle this carefully to preserve evidence, but we also need to get your daughter to safety. Frank, there's something else. I think Jonathan is planning something big today. He mentioned wanting to take Peyton to his bank to add her to some investment accounts. Jesus, Mark. He's probably planning to clean out her finances while she's too impaired to understand what she's signing. The next hour was the longest of my life. I had to act normal around Jonathan and Peyton while knowing that every sip of coffee, every pill he gave her, was potentially pushing her closer to permanent damage or death. Peyton looked worse than I had ever seen her. Her skin was pale and clammy. Her hands shook when she tried to hold her coffee cup, and she kept losing track of conversations mid-sentence. Dad, I feel so strange, she whispered to me, when Jonathan stepped out to get something from their room. Everything feels fuzzy, like I'm watching my life through a dirty window. Sweetheart, I think you might be having a reaction to your medication. Maybe we should go to the hospital." "Jonathan says it's normal," she replied, but I could hear doubt in her voice for the first time. "But I don't remember feeling this way before I started seeing Dr. Webb." "What do you remember about Dr. Webb?" Peyton frowned, concentrating hard. "That's the strange thing. I remember Jonathan making the appointment, but I can't really remember the actual visit. Jonathan said I was so anxious that Dr. Webb gave me something to help me relax during the consultation." My heart broke for her. She was starting to realize something was wrong, but the drugs were making it impossible for her to think clearly enough to understand what was happening to her. Jonathan returned with a folder full of papers. "Darling, I've arranged for us to visit my financial advisor today. There are some investment opportunities that could really benefit us both." He set the papers in front of Peyton, and I could see they were bank account applications and investment forms that would give him access to her trust fund, money that came from her mother's life insurance policy. "I don't know, Jonathan," Peyton said slowly. "I feel so confused today. Maybe we should wait until I'm feeling better." Jonathan's expression darkened for just a moment before he forced his charming smile back into place. "Nonsense, sweetheart. You're just tired. This will only take a few minutes, and then we can come back and rest." He opened a small pill container and shook out 2 white tablets. "Dr. Webb said to take these if you felt anxious about making important decisions. They'll help you think more clearly." I watched in horror as he handed her the pills. This was it. He was preparing to give her an even stronger dose before taking her to sign away her financial independence. "Actually," I interrupted, standing up abruptly, "I was thinking we should all go out for a nice breakfast first. My treat?" Jonathan looked annoyed. "Mr. Richardson, we really should handle this business first. The bank closes early on Saturdays. The pills can wait until after we eat," I said firmly, hoping Peyton would pick up on my urgency. Peyton looked between us, confusion clear on her face, but instead of taking the pills, she set them down on the table. "Dad's right. I should eat something first." Jonathan's mask slipped completely for a split second, and I saw pure rage flash across his face, but he recovered quickly. "Of course. Let me just put these somewhere safe for later." As he reached for the pills, I heard it, the sound I had been waiting for. A gentle knock at the door, followed by Frank's voice. "Hotel security. We need to speak with the guests in this room." Jonathan froze. Peyton looked confused. I felt a surge of relief so powerful that my knees nearly buckled. "I'll get it," I said, moving quickly to the door. Frank was there with 2 uniformed officers and a paramedic. Behind them, I could see Dr. Kim with her medical bag. "Mr. Richardson," Frank said formally, "we've received reports of a medical emergency in this room." Jonathan stepped forward, his voice smooth and confident. "Officers, there's been some mistake. Everyone here is fine." "Sir, we're going to need to see some identification," one of the uniformed officers said. As Jonathan reached for his wallet, Frank caught my eye and nodded slightly. This was my moment. "Peyton," I said gently, "these people are here to help you. The doctor needs to check on your medication." "My medication?" Peyton looked even more confused. Dr. Kim stepped forward with a kind smile. "Miss Richardson, I'm Dr. Kim from Northwestern Memorial. Your father was concerned about some symptoms you've been having. I'd like to run a few quick tests just to make sure your current prescriptions aren't interacting badly." "That's completely unnecessary," Jonathan said, his voice getting sharper. "Her doctor has everything under control." "And what doctor would that be?" Frank asked, pulling out his notepad. "Dr. Marcus Webb. He's a specialist in anxiety and sleep disorders." Frank and I exchanged glances. "Sir, are you aware that Dr. Webb's medical license was suspended 2 days ago, pending investigation?" The color drained from Jonathan's face. Peyton gasped, looking back and forth between us. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice small and frightened. Dr. Kim knelt beside Peyton's chair. "Sweetheart, I need to ask you some questions. Have you been feeling confused, dizzy, or having trouble remembering things lately?" "Yes," Peyton whispered, tears starting to form in her eyes. But Jonathan said it was just stress. "Miss Richardson, I believe you've been given medication without your full knowledge or consent. I need to examine you and run some tests to make sure you're okay." Jonathan suddenly lunged for the pills on the table, but Frank was faster. I wouldn't do that if I were you. As Frank handcuffed Jonathan, the man I had trusted with my daughter's happiness finally showed his true face. "You don't understand," he snarled at me. "She's nothing without me. Just another spoiled rich girl who doesn't appreciate what she has." Peyton was crying now, the reality of her situation beginning to penetrate the fog of drugs. "Dad, I'm so scared. I don't understand what's happening to me." I knelt beside her chair and took her trembling hands in mine. "Sweetheart, you've been very sick, but you're going to be okay. We're going to take you to the hospital and get you the help you need." Boris. As the paramedics prepared to transport Peyton to Northwestern Memorial, I realized that while we had stopped Jonathan's immediate plan, the real battle was just beginning. My daughter had months of poison to recover from, and I wasn't sure yet what permanent damage had been done. But she was alive, she was safe, and for the first time in months, she was going to receive medical care designed to heal her, not control her. The nightmare was far from over, but at least now we were fighting back. The next 72 hours at Northwestern Memorial Hospital were both the most terrifying and hopeful of my life. Watching my daughter go through medical detoxification while fighting to understand how deeply she had been betrayed was heartbreaking, but seeing her mind slowly clear was like watching someone return from the dead. Dr. Kim worked around the clock with a team of specialists to safely remove the toxic cocktail of drugs from Peyton's system. The withdrawal process was brutal. Peyton experienced severe anxiety, tremors, and confusion as her brain tried to function without the chemical suppression it had endured for months. "The good news," Dr. Kim explained to me on the third day, "is that we caught this before permanent neurological damage occurred. Peyton is young and strong. Her brain should recover fully, but it will take time." "How much time?" "Several weeks for the acute symptoms to subside, several months for her cognitive function to return to normal. The psychological recovery will take longer." I spent every moment at Peyton's bedside, holding her hand through the worst of it. During her lucid moments, she began to remember things that Jonathan had made her forget. "Dad," she whispered on the fourth morning, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "I remember signing papers, but I don't remember what they were for. Jonathan always said I was too tired to understand the details." "We're going to figure all of that out," I assured her. "Right now, you just focus on getting better." But I was already working behind the scenes with Robert to understand the full scope of the legal and financial damage Jonathan had done. What we discovered was worse than I had feared. Robert spread the documents across the conference table in his office. "Mark, Jonathan has been very busy. He has power of attorney for Peyton's medical and financial decisions. He's added himself to her checking account, her savings account, and he's applied to be the beneficiary on her trust fund. Can we reverse all of this? Most of it, yes, but it's going to take time and legal action. The bigger problem is this." Robert handed me a thick document. Jonathan filed a conservatorship petition claiming Peyton is mentally incompetent due to severe anxiety and depression. If this had gone through, he would have had complete control over her life and finances. My hands shook as I read the document. Jonathan had been planning to have my daughter declared legally incompetent so he could control every aspect of her existence while slowly poisoning her into compliance. When was this filed? 2 weeks ago. The hearing is scheduled for next Monday. I felt sick. If Maria hadn't found those pills, if I hadn't discovered the truth when I did, Peyton would have been declared incompetent while under the influence of drugs that made her actually appear mentally unstable. "Robert, I want you to file an emergency motion to dismiss this conservatorship petition. I want every document Jonathan made Peyton sign to be challenged on the grounds that she was under the influence of controlled substances. And I want a restraining order keeping him away from my daughter." "Already working on it. But Mark, there's something else. Jonathan's not acting alone." Robert pulled out another file. Dr. Webb wasn't just prescribing illegal medications. He was documenting Peyton's mental instability in falsified medical records to support the conservatorship petition. They were building a legal case to prove she was incompetent. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. This wasn't just about drugging Peyton, it was a carefully orchestrated plan to legally steal her identity, her money, and her freedom. How many other women has he done this to? We're still investigating, but the police found evidence of at least 3 other victims over the past 5 years. All wealthy, all young, all ended up giving him access to significant amounts of money before disappearing from their own lives. I thought about those other women, other fathers who might never have discovered the truth in time. My determination to see Jonathan prosecuted to the full extent of the law intensified. Frank Morrison came to see me that evening at the hospital. "Mark, I wanted to give you an update on the investigation." We stepped outside Peyton's room so she couldn't hear. She was finally sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. We executed search warrants on Jonathan's apartment and Dr. Webb's office. What we found is going to put both of them away for a very long time. What did you find? Detailed records of the drugging schedule, including notes about adjusting dosages based on Peyton's compliance, financial records showing money being transferred from previous victims, and video recordings. Video recordings? Frank's expression was grim. Jonathan recorded himself manipulating the women while they were drugged, partly for his own sick pleasure, partly as insurance to blackmail them if they ever tried to leave. I had to lean against the wall. The man I had welcomed into my family, the man I had trusted with my daughter's happiness, was a predator of the worst kind. "Frank, please tell me he's not getting out on bail." "No chance. He's charged with conspiracy, fraud, poisoning, and attempted conservatorship fraud. The DA is also looking at charges related to the other victims. He's looking at 20 to 30 years. And Dr. Webb? His medical license is permanently revoked, and he's facing similar charges. Plus, the medical board is investigating how many other patients he may have harmed." That night, I sat beside Peyton's hospital bed, watching her sleep naturally for the first time in months. Her color was returning, the tremors had stopped, and she looked more like my daughter than she had since her wedding. But I knew the hardest part was still ahead. When Peyton was fully recovered, she would have to face the psychological trauma of everything Jonathan had done to her. She would have to rebuild her sense of trust, her confidence in her own judgment, her ability to make decisions for herself. Dr. Kim had already arranged for Peyton to work with Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a therapist who specialized in helping victims of psychological manipulation and drugging. The process would be long and difficult, but it was necessary for Peyton to fully reclaim her life. As I held my daughter's hand in the quiet hospital room, I made a promise to myself and to her mother's memory. I would use every resource I had to help Peyton heal completely. I would make sure Jonathan and Dr. Webb paid for every day of suffering they had caused her, and I would never again take for granted the precious gift of my daughter's trust and safety. The legal battles ahead would be complex and expensive, but I had 23 million reasons to fight for as long as it took. More importantly, I had the most important reason of all, my daughter's life and future. Over the next week, as Peyton's strength returned and her mind cleared, she began to ask the hard questions. "Dad, how did this happen? How did I let someone do this to me?" "Sweetheart, you didn't let anything happen. You were betrayed by someone you trusted, someone who used medicine and manipulation against you. None of this is your fault. But I should have known. I should have questioned why I felt so strange all the time. Peyton, the drugs Jonathan gave you were specifically designed to make you compliant and confused. Fighting back would have been almost impossible in your condition." Slowly, painfully, she began to piece together the months of her life that had been stolen from her. With Dr. Martinez's help, she started to understand how predators like Jonathan operated, how they targeted intelligent, successful women, and used their trust against them. "The worst part," Peyton told me one afternoon, "is that I really thought he loved me. Even when I felt sick and confused, I thought he was trying to help me feel better." "He exploited your capacity for love and trust," I replied. "That doesn't make you weak or foolish. It makes you human." But I could see that rebuilding Peyton's confidence would take time. She second-guessed every decision, questioned every feeling, and struggled to trust her own perceptions about people and situations. That's when I realized that my role as her father had fundamentally changed. For the rest of her recovery, I wouldn't just be supporting her, I would be helping her learn to trust herself again, one decision at a time. 3 weeks after Peyton's rescue from Jonathan's manipulation, she was finally strong enough to leave the hospital. But bringing her home meant facing a devastating reality. The apartment she had shared with Jonathan was filled with reminders of her captivity, and she couldn't bear to return there. "Dad, I can't go back to that place," she told me, as we sat in her hospital room preparing for discharge. "Every room, every piece of furniture, it all feels contaminated by what he did to me." "You never have to go back there," I assured her. "We'll send movers to get your things. You can stay with me as long as you need." But I could see the conflict in her eyes. At 28 years old, Peyton had been fiercely independent before Jonathan entered her life. The idea of moving back in with her father, even temporarily, felt like another loss of autonomy. Dr. Martinez helped us work through this during one of our family counseling sessions. Peyton, accepting help during recovery isn't the same as being dependent. You're choosing to create a safe environment for yourself while you heal. "But what if I never feel capable of living on my own again?" Peyton asked, voicing the fear that haunted both of us. "Then we'll deal with that when and if it happens," I said firmly. "But I don't believe it will. You're stronger than you know." The first week at my house was challenging for both of us. Peyton experienced mood swings as her brain chemistry continued to normalize. Some days she was angry, furious at Jonathan for what he had done, furious at herself for not recognizing the signs, furious at the months of her life that had been stolen. Other days she was overwhelmed by sadness and fear. She would wake up from nightmares, convinced that someone was putting drugs in her food or drink. She couldn't make simple decisions like what to eat for breakfast without becoming paralyzed by anxiety. "What if I can never trust my own judgment again?" she asked me one morning after spending an hour unable to choose between cereal or toast. "Your judgment was compromised by powerful drugs," I reminded her. "As your system continues to clear, your confidence will return." But I was worried too. The vibrant, decisive woman who had run her own marketing consultancy seemed like a shadow of herself. I began to wonder if the psychological damage might be harder to heal than the physical effects of the drugs. That's when Robert called with news that changed everything. "Mark, the DA wants Peyton to testify at Jonathan's trial. Her testimony could be crucial in convicting him and preventing him from doing this to other women." I felt my protective instincts flare. "She's barely recovering. How can they ask her to relive all of this in a courtroom?" "I understand your concerns, but there's something else. The DA believes that testifying might actually help Peyton's recovery. It would give her a chance to take back her power, to be the one holding Jonathan accountable instead of being his victim." I discussed it with Peyton that evening. Her initial reaction was terror. "Dad, I can't face him. What if I break down? What if I can't remember things clearly? What if he still has some kind of power over me?" "Sweetheart, you don't have to decide right now, but think about this. You could help ensure that he never does this to another woman. You could be the one who stops him." Dr. Martinez supported the idea when we discussed it in therapy. "Peyton, many trauma survivors find that taking action against their abuser is a crucial step in reclaiming their sense of agency. But only you can decide if you're ready." It took Peyton 2 weeks to make her decision, but when she did, I saw a spark of the strong woman she had always been. "I want to testify," she told me one evening, "not just for the other women he might hurt, but for myself. I want to look him in the eye and tell the truth about what he did to me." Preparing for the trial became Peyton's mission. She worked with the district attorney's office to review evidence, practice her testimony, and understand the legal process. For the first time since her rescue, she had a clear purpose and goal. "Dad, I remember more every day," she told me as we prepared for the trial. "I remember him crushing pills into my coffee. I remember signing papers while feeling like I was underwater. I remember him telling me I was too confused to make my own decisions. The memories were painful, but they were also empowering. Each recovered memory was proof that her mind was healing, that the fog of manipulation was finally lifting." The night before her testimony, Peyton was nervous but determined. What if the defense attorney tries to make me look crazy or unreliable? Then you tell the truth, I said. You tell them about the woman you were before Jonathan, about your successful business, about your independence. You show them who you really are. Who I really am, she repeated softly. I'm still figuring that out. You're a survivor, I told her. You're a woman who refused to disappear even when someone tried to erase you. The day of the trial, I sat in the courtroom gallery as Peyton took the witness stand. Jonathan sat at the defense table, and for a moment I saw her falter as their eyes met. But then she straightened her shoulders and began to speak. Her testimony was devastating. In a clear, strong voice, she described the gradual erosion of her autonomy, the physical symptoms she had experienced, and the legal documents she had been manipulated into signing while under the influence of drugs. He told me he loved me, she said, looking directly at the jury. But love doesn't involve poisoning someone. Love doesn't involve stealing someone's ability to think clearly. What Jonathan did to me wasn't love, it was control, and it nearly destroyed my life. The defense attorney tried to suggest that Peyton had been a willing participant in her own medication, that she had been genuinely anxious and had consented to treatment. But Peyton was ready for this. I never consented to having my coffee drugged, she said firmly. I never consented to signing legal documents while impaired. And I certainly never consented to being declared mentally incompetent so that someone could steal my money and my life. When the prosecutor asked her about the impact of Jonathan's actions, Peyton's voice grew stronger, not weaker. He stole 8 months of my life. He made me doubt my own mind, my own perceptions, my own worth. But he didn't succeed in destroying me. I'm here, I'm recovering, and I'm making sure he can never do this to another woman. As I watched my daughter testify, I felt a surge of pride that brought tears to my eyes. This was the woman I had raised. Strong, honest, brave. Jonathan had tried to erase her, but she had refused to disappear. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with guilty verdicts on all counts. Jonathan was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Dr. Webb received 15 years for his role in the conspiracy. Outside the courthouse, Peyton was surrounded by reporters, but she handled their questions with grace and strength. What would you say to other women who might be in similar situations? One reporter asked. Trust your instincts, Peyton replied. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And don't be afraid to ask for help. There are people who will believe you and fight for you. That evening, as we sat in my kitchen sharing a quiet dinner, Peyton looked at me with clear, bright eyes. Dad, I want to move back into my own place next month. I felt a flutter of concern, but I pushed it down. Are you sure you're ready? I'm sure. These past few months with you have given me the foundation I needed to heal, but now I need to prove to myself that I can live independently again. What about your business? Peyton smiled, the first genuine smile I had seen from her in almost a year. I've been thinking about that. I want to restart my consultancy, but I also want to do something else. I want to work with other survivors, help them navigate the legal system, connect them with resources. That sounds like exactly the kind of work you were meant to do. I think Mom would be proud, she said softly. I know she would be, I replied, and so am I. As I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, I realized that while Jonathan had taken 8 months of her life, he had also inadvertently given her something valuable, an unshakable knowledge of her own strength. She had survived the worst kind of betrayal and emerged not broken, but transformed. 1 year after Jonathan's conviction, I stood in the lobby of Peyton's new office building, watching her through the glass doors as she met with a client. She was animated, confident, gesturing with the same passion she had always brought to her work. The transformation was remarkable, but it hadn't been easy. The past 12 months had been a journey of rediscovery for both of us. Peyton had not only rebuilt her marketing consultancy, but had also launched what she called the Clarity Project, a nonprofit organization that provided legal and emotional support to victims of drugging and psychological manipulation. Dad, you're early, Peyton said as she walked her client to the elevator. Her smile was genuine, her handshake firm. This was the daughter I remembered from before Jonathan. Strong, capable, fully present. "I wanted to see you in action," I said, giving her a hug. That looked like it went well. It did. "We're launching a campaign to help small businesses recover from fraud. It feels good to use my skills to help people who've been taken advantage of." We walked to her office, which was bright and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. On her desk was a framed photo of her mother and a small sculpture I had given her, a phoenix rising from flames. "How's the Clarity Project going?" I asked. Peyton's eyes lit up. "We've helped 18 women so far navigate legal challenges related to drugging cases. 3 of them testified in trials that resulted in convictions, and we've started a support group that meets twice a week." "And how are you doing with all of this? Isn't it difficult to relive trauma through other people's experiences?" "Sometimes," she admitted, "but Dr. Martinez prepared me for that. She said that helping others heal often accelerates our own healing, and she was right. Every woman I help reminds me of how far I've come." 6 months after the trial, we had received unexpected news that brought both closure and vindication. The FBI had discovered that Jonathan's operation was larger than anyone had realized. Using the evidence from his conviction, they had tracked down 7 additional victims across 4 states. "Mr. Richardson," Special Agent Patricia Woods had told us during a briefing, "your daughter's testimony was the key that unlocked a multi-state investigation. Because of her courage, we've been able to prosecute an entire network of people involved in these schemes." The network included 2 other corrupt doctors, a lawyer who specialized in fraudulent conservatorships, and even a pharmacist who had been supplying drugs without proper documentation. All of them were now serving prison sentences. "Peyton," Agent Woods had continued, "the women we've rescued because of your testimony asked me to give you this." She handed Peyton a letter signed by all 7 women. It read simply, "Thank you for giving us our lives back. Because you spoke up, we found the courage to speak up too." I remember watching Peyton read that letter, tears streaming down her face. It was a turning point in her recovery, the moment she fully understood that her survival and testimony had meaning beyond her own healing. Now, a year later, Peyton had not only reclaimed her life, but had discovered a new purpose. The Clarity Project had become her passion, and watching her counsel other survivors had shown me depths of strength and compassion in my daughter that I had never fully appreciated. "There's something I want to show you," Peyton said, pulling a folder from her desk drawer. "Remember Maria, the housekeeper who saved my life?" "Of course. How could I forget her? I've been working with immigration lawyers to help her get permanent residency. Her courage in speaking up despite the risk to her job and immigration status saved my life. I want to make sure she's protected." This was so typical of Peyton. Even in the midst of her own recovery, she was thinking about others who had helped her. Maria had indeed lost her job at the hotel after testifying in Jonathan's trial, despite legal protections for witnesses. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. What else can I do to help?" "Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. The Clarity Project is growing faster than I expected. We need more resources, more staff, maybe even a residential facility where women can stay while they're recovering and going through legal proceedings." I smiled, understanding immediately what she was asking. "How much do you need?" "Dad, I don't want you to feel obligated just because I'm your daughter. This should be a business decision." "Peyton, you're absolutely right. So let me ask you, do you believe this organization fills a real need?" "Absolutely. There are so few resources for victims of this type of crime. Most domestic violence shelters aren't equipped to handle the medical and legal complexities of drugging cases. Do you believe you're the right person to run it?" "I believe I'm one of the right people. I have the business experience, the personal understanding of what victims go through, and the passion to see it succeed." "Then you have your answer. I'll invest $2 million in the Clarity Project, with the understanding that this is a business investment in an organization I believe will make a real difference." Peyton's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy and determination, not the confused, frightened tears I had seen so often during her recovery. "There's one more thing," she said, pulling out another document. "I want to change my name legally. I never want to be Peyton Mitchell again. I want to go back to being Peyton Richardson. Sweetheart, you were always Peyton Richardson in my heart. I know, but I need to make it official. I need to reclaim every part of my identity that he tried to steal. 6 months later, I attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Clarity Project's new facility. It was a beautiful, safe space with medical facilities, legal offices, counseling rooms, and temporary housing for women in crisis. Peyton stood at the podium addressing a crowd of supporters, volunteers, and local officials. But what moved me most were the survivors in the audience, women who had found help and hope through Peyton's organization. 2 years ago, Peyton said, someone tried to erase me. They tried to steal my mind, my money, my freedom, and my future. They almost succeeded, but they underestimated something crucial. They underestimated the power of people who refused to let evil win. And she gestured to me in the audience. They underestimated a father's love. They underestimated the courage of a housekeeper named Maria, who risked everything to speak up. They underestimated the dedication of doctors and lawyers and police officers who believed that justice matters. Her voice grew stronger. And they underestimated the strength of survivors who refused to stay silent. Every woman who walks through these doors is not just a victim. She's a warrior who has already won the most important battle of her life. She survived. As I listened to my daughter speak, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. The sale of my beach house had been meant to provide financial security for my family. Instead, it had led to the discovery of a plot that could have destroyed my daughter's life. But it had also led to something beautiful. Peyton had not only recovered from her ordeal, she had transformed it into a mission to help others. The money from my business success was now funding an organization that would help countless women reclaim their lives and dignity. That evening, Peyton and I had dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the lake. She looked radiant, healthy, purposeful, everything I had hoped she would become and more. Dad, do you ever regret selling the beach house? If you hadn't done that, we never would have gone to that hotel, and I might never have discovered what Jonathan was doing to me. I considered her question carefully. I think everything happened the way it was supposed to happen. Your mother always believed that our challenges were meant to prepare us for our purpose. Maybe this was yours. I miss her, Peyton said softly. I wish she could see what we've built. She can see it, I assured her, and she's proud of the woman you've become. As we walked back to our cars, Peyton stopped and hugged me tightly. Thank you for saving my life, Dad. But more than that, thank you for helping me find my purpose. You found your purpose all by yourself, I replied. I just provided the investment capital. Driving home that night, I reflected on the strange turns life can take. Jonathan had tried to steal my daughter's future, but instead, he had inadvertently led her to a future more meaningful than anything she had imagined before. Peyton was not just surviving, she was thriving. She was not just healed, she was helping others heal. And while I would never be grateful for what she endured, I was profoundly grateful for who she had become because of how she chose to respond to it. The beach house money had bought us more than financial security. It had bought us the chance to turn a tragedy into a triumph, a victim into a victor, and a personal nightmare into a public force for good. Some investments paid dividends for years. The best investments change lives forever. Watching my daughter cut the ribbon on the Clarity Project, I knew I had made the best investment of my life, not in real estate or business ventures, but in the unbreakable strength of a woman who refused to let anyone steal her light. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in 2 years, knowing that my daughter was not only safe, but was using her experience to keep other daughters safe too. Justice had been served, healing had taken place, and purpose had been found. The nightmare was finally completely over. The new dream was just beginning.